and welcome to my October reading wrap-up. My name is Marley. I hope you guys are doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in October. I read a total of 12 books, including some manga and some regular novels. I had a pretty good time. I read quite a few spooky books for the Halloween theme. Also found a new manga series, so stay tuned to find out what it is. And I'm going to talk about them in order of my least favorite to my favorite, as I always do. So starting out, we are beginning with The God's Lie, which I read for my reading manga vlog that I did at the beginning of the month, which I will link around here. This was actually the very first thing that I read, and obviously my least favorite. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. This is a quick little 1-volume manga about this kid who is kind of a bit of an outcast at his school. He's like a new kid and he's still figuring things out, and he ends up bonding with this other girl at his school who seems to have some sort of secrets going on, a mysterious home life with her and her little brother, and then he ends up getting involved and finding out what her secret is and being drawn into her life. This book had this sort of mysterious premise, and I was just very let down with what the twists end up being. I felt like it was not long enough for me to really get invested in the storylines or the characters, and there were also quite a few like weird cringy things about the main character that I didn't really like, so didn't really enjoy this very much. Wouldn't really recommend it. I think my friend that recommended it to me said she read it like when she was younger, so quite a while ago, and I could see that. I feel like maybe it would work in like the old days or for like a younger audience or something, but not really for me currently. Another book I read this month and was very happy to complete is Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this story. So obviously it is about Count Dracula, who lives in this mansion, and this man, Jonathan, comes to stay at the mansion for some sort of work business situation, and then quickly realizes he is actually being held captive by Count Dracula, who seems to be a vampire. You find that out pretty quickly, and then we're following a bunch of other humans who are all sort of friends with Jonathan. There seems like something is going on with their one friend Lucy. She keeps waking up super tired, pale, she has bite marks in her neck, and I don't really know how to like summarize the rest of it, but it's basically this crew trying to take down Dracula. This was a very boring book. I did give it 3 stars, so not too bad, but like I was suffering through some of this book. However, I did also find it pretty cool to read about Dracula, just like the origin story of vampires kind of, and reading about all the little vampire tropes that are in this, like how he can't cross water, how he can turn into a bat, how he can control animals, things like that that you don't see in a lot of more modern vampire stories. And I'm just glad that I finally read it, and now I actually know the story of Dracula. I know who Mina is, I know who Lucy is, I know who Van Helsing is, who apparently is a famous vampire hunter. I didn't know that before. I do have a whole vlog actually where I read this along with another Halloween classic, so I'll link that as well, but it is a spoiler vlog, so keep that in mind. But yeah, I would recommend this if you are interested in vampires and horror and stuff like that, but just be warned, like it is very boring. There is so much being dragged out and so many words considering what actually ends up happening. So next up is another manga. This was a multi-volume manga, but I actually decided that I'm probably not going to continue it, and it is called Kamisama Kiss, and I gave it 3.5 stars. This is about this girl. She also has a very like misfortuned life. I feel like that's very common in manga. Like everyone just has a terrible life at the beginning, and she ends up becoming a god. Randomly, this god like gives her their power, and so she has to learn how to be a god. Has like a little task that she has to do that I assume each book will kind of be like a new task or a new thing that she's learning. There is a romance in this as well that is featured. It's like enemies to lovers if you're into that sort of thing. But this book just didn't overly like impress me. With the other manga that I read that I'll talk about later, those ones just like stood out to me more. I was way more invested in the stories and interested in what was gonna happen. And this one, I just felt like I could easily step away from it. The romance didn't quite get me quite yet either in that book, so it was just kind of like an average read for me. This month I also finally read Ace of Spades by Faridah, Àbíké-Íyímídé. I'm not sure how to say it, but this is a very popular YA thriller mystery right now, so I was super excited for it, and I will admit I was a little bit let down by it. I ended up giving it a 3.5 star rating. So this is, I guess it's sort of dark academia as well, which people love, as it follows these two students, Chiamaka and Devon. And just as everyone's saying, it is like a combination of Gossip Girl, or I would say Pretty Little Liars, and Get Out. These two happen to be the only black kids at their like super rich, like preppy private school. And besides their skin color, like that's the only thing that they have in common. Chiamaka is like head of the school, like very popular, gets perfect grades, like is class president, all that sort of stuff. And Devon is just kind of like the guy that's not very popular, is not very well known. I think he's a musician. He's more like artsy and like not as academic. Then this mysterious person named Aces starts revealing all of their secrets, and it's clear that they're targeting these two because they're the only students that are getting outed. They're revealing either their real secrets, or they're actually kind of targeting them and creating fake secrets that they can then reveal, kind of like framing them for crimes they didn't do, kind of thing. So they end up having to like band together, try and figure out what is going on. So I did enjoy parts of this. I mean, it's a YA mystery, and I love that. I just love everything that genre has to offer. However, in terms of the mystery, I was a little bit disappointed with it. I think I got a little bit spoiled from someone else's review on like the direction that I was going, and then because of that, I just found it very, very obvious what was happening, and so the mystery element was not very great for me. I did really enjoy Chiamaka's character, but Devon, I was like not a huge fan of like him and his storyline, and I kept finding things that he did annoying, whereas I was like rooting for Chiamaka a lot more. So that was just something that also kind of hindered my experience. Also, a very random thing that I want to mention in this book that I found very weird was that Chiamaka has this best friend. Can't remember his name at this point. At one point, she makes like a diabetes related joke, and then she feels bad because she's like, oh, he recently got diagnosed with diabetes, like I shouldn't be talking about it. I recently was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes this year, so when I saw that I was like, oh my gosh, we're getting like type 1 diabetes rep. If you guys don't know, type 1 is the type that you get when you're younger, so that's clearly the one that he had. I was like, wow, we're getting some like random kind of diabetes rep in this book, and I was excited about it, and then it's literally never mentioned again, ever. And I'm like, why was that in this? And it was kind of like a weird representation. Like, she's made some comment about how he binges on candy like only once a week because of that, and I'm just like, this is kind of weird rep. Like, it just got me very excited that we were gonna have like a diabetes character, which I've not seen in a book since I was diagnosed, but it became nothing. So I feel like maybe that's a dumb reason for me to be resentful, but I kind of was resentful about that. I do also feel like this book was super like sexual maybe, and I feel like I don't always love that because I'm just like, teens, they're so young, like why are they having so much like casual sex going on? But that's the reality, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I think mostly I was disappointed because I had such high expectations and it just didn't meet them, so it made the disappointment feel bigger. But I still like this. I still would recommend it if you want to read a book that deals with racism, as you can obviously imagine they are targeting them due to racism. Next up, I rated this book 4 stars, and that was Hell's Paradise, which was the next manga that I read for that reading blog. So this was a pretty cool one. This is one of the ones that I am interested in continuing, and it is about this famous assassin. He ends up getting captured, but they cannot kill him because he has some sort of like magical power, obviously, where he cannot be killed unless he wants to be, and obviously he doesn't want to be, so they put him and a bunch of other criminals up to this task of going to this island and stealing this magical elixir or something like that. It was a while ago that I read now. But yeah, so they put him up to this challenge and they say that if he does it, then he can be free. With manga series, I mean, the first volume is really just kind of setting things up, so that was essentially it. But I was very I don't know, interested in our main character, the assassin, and then the girl that was in charge of watching him and like being his guard because he is a criminal. And I'm excited to see where that series would go and what's going to happen on the island and all that sort of stuff. So I did give it a 4 because I did quite enjoy that one, and I liked all the action and stuff as well. Next up, we have Watching You by Lisa Jewell. I have read quite a few Lisa Jewells now, or maybe only like maybe 3 or 4. Making my way through them. I'm enjoying all of them, giving them all like 4 or 5 stars. This one, I feel like I'm gonna have trouble describing it because the premise on like the flap is so vague, and after reading it, I see why. Like, it's very hard to describe, but it's essentially what I would call more of like a domestic thriller, as she normally does, where it's following a bunch of different households in this one neighborhood. And it's not the type of neighborhood you think like bad things would be happening in, but we know at the beginning that there has been a murder. We're getting some flashbacks to like a police interview, so we know that someone's going to die, and we kind of know who the main suspect is going to be, but we're all just like leading up to that. Our main character is this girl who recently married this man, and they're living in her brother's house with his wife. So that's like the one household. They live next to this man who is like the head teacher guy, and then he has a wife, and then he has a son, and we're also following this mother-daughter household as well, and kind of all of their intricacies. Like, the one son is kind of has some like odd things about him. We later realize he is on the autism spectrum, but he is like obsessed with watching the young girls. The young girl's mom seems to be suffering from schizophrenia, and she like thinks that there's this whole conspiracy out to get her. There's some like infidelity that goes on. There's some potential predatory things going on, as the teacher seems like he might have an interest in young girls. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening here, and you just have to go along for the ride and see what ends up happening. The twist was not super shocking, but I kind of say this for all Lisa Jewell books, that her twists are never that shocking. It's just kind of like the characters are so interesting, and she makes such a twisted story that it's just so like gripping. So this was a pretty like average good thriller. So the other horror classic that I read was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. So obviously I would recommend this one over Dracula if you want to read one of these classics. It is like 100 or over 100 pages shorter, so that is one of the reasons it was better. But I just really adored this story. As you guys probably know, it's about this man, Victor Frankenstein, who ends up creating life. He creates this creature, and then he ends up abandoning the creature and thinking he's ugly and hideous and like a monster. And so because of that, the creature grows up without having love, without being, you know, taught how to behave, all these things, and does end up becoming a killer and kind of like becoming the monster that Victor assumes he is. And it's sort of this story of revenge, I guess, between the two of them, and this like, yeah, just very hateful relationship between the two of them. And I just loved the like messages that it could represent, which is like child abandonment, things like that. And I just loved the creature Frankenstein. Like, I just feel like he's such a fascinating character. So I definitely recommend this book. And again, check out my vlog if you want like more details and you don't mind me like spoiling all of the elements of the story. Then I read my first 5-star book of this month, and that was the Southern Book, can I even say this? The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, a very popular horror book. I read this for my personal book club with my friends. Yeah, we all loved it. It's a super fun premise. It is following this group of housewives in the late 80s, early 90s. At first, our main character, Patricia, is a part of this one book club, but she is really not interested in the sort of books they're reading, so she ends up joining this other one that reads a lot of like true crime, mysteries, thrillers, that kind of thing, which she's a lot more interested in. And then a real life true crime story comes to their town. This man, what was his name now? Maybe Henry. Anyways, this kind of stranger comes into town, and with their like southern hospitality, at first they're very like nice to him, open to him, welcoming him into their home, and then they quickly realize that he might be a vampire. They have to sort of take on destroying him and saving the town, saving the children, as he seems to be targeting young children in this Black community. It definitely has social commentary on racism, on sexism, on stay-at-home mothers or parents, motherhood in general. I really enjoyed reading horror this month because I just sort of like the social commentary that they all seem to have, and how real life horrors get reflected into these stories that are sort of like exaggerated or fantastical with vampires, but it really does represent like the true evils in the world. But this was a very, very disturbing book as well. There is a scene with rats that everyone always mentions, very disturbing, and there are multiple other scenes after that that are just so gross to read, and I just keep saying disturbing because that's the best word. Like, it was one of the most disturbing books I've ever read, so definitely be aware of that if you're going to read this book. It's It's not easy to get through those parts, but it is overall an easy book to get through because it is so good. So highly recommend that. And then finally, probably my favorite thing that I read this month is the Promised Neverland manga. I'm holding up the 4th volume right now because I read volumes 1 to 4 this month. So you can see this was my favorite manga that I read, and I am in fact continuing it. So this surrounds an orphanage called Gracefield House. We have our 3 main characters who you can see here. They are the oldest in the orphanage, they're the smartest, and they're raised by this one mother, this one lady. Then see, this book has so many like twists and turns that I don't want to reveal anything, but they basically end up figuring out that the orphanage is more than it seems. It's not this nice happy place they think it is where their siblings are slowly getting adopted. There is something a lot darker going on here that I'm not gonna say, but then it becomes sort of like a adventure story, I guess, where they are trying to escape from this orphanage. And I'm loving this because the main characters are so smart that it reminds me a lot of the other like manga slash anime I've seen slash read, which is Death Note, which just has very smart characters that are constantly kind of like making plans to go against each other, a cat and mouse game sort of thing. And this book really has that. There's so many like characters trying to trick each other and strategize, and there's plot twists in every volume that I've read so far. So I've given this whole series 5 stars so far. Hopefully I continue to enjoy it. I think there is like 20 something volumes that my friend has kindly lent to me. Maybe it won't stay this good forever, but right now I'm really enjoying it, and I highly recommend if you guys like manga, or even if you don't, because this has sort of been my introduction to it, and I'm no expert, but I'm really loving this. I would say if you really do like YA mysteries, because our characters are so young, they're like 12 and under, and then there's a lot of mystery and like thrilling components, so highly recommend. So that's everything I read in October. Let me know if you guys read any of these things as well, and we can discuss. Definitely make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you had a great Halloween. Until next time, bye!